Welcome back to The Observing Eye. This is Pirate Radio for the Mind. And this week we are exploring being, time, and death with Martin Heidegger. Heidegger is in the Black Forest, a squat cabin, wood stacked neat against the wall, the kind of silence that makes your own heart feel too loud in your ears. Heidegger, sitting at a desk, chain smoking, is scratching notes about being. A philosopher who didn't just want to explain life, but to strip it down until only the skeleton was left grinning at you. This is the guy who said philosophy had forgotten its first question. Not what is truth, not what is justice, not even does God exist. The most basic, most brutal question. What does it mean to be? For 2,000 years, philosophers had danced around it, talking about forms and matter and minds and machines, as if existence itself were too obvious to talk about. Heidegger said no. Obvious things kill us. Obvious things are the most dangerous. You need to stare into the thing so close that you've gone blind to it. And the timing, early 20th century Germany. A country still choking on the dust of World War I, crawling with wounded men and broken promises. The Weimar Republic wobbling on toothpick legs, ideas fermenting like spoiled wine. Out of this comes Heidegger, with his thick peasant accent, his obsession with silence, his belief that philosophy should not be an escape from life, but a confrontation with it. Picture the audience he was talking to. A whole civilization clinging to technology, to politics, to the machine hum of progress, while under the surface, dread was gnawing. Heidegger's words hit like an alarm clock in a burning house. He says you are not a cog in a machine, you are Dasein, a being who must wrestle with existence itself, a being condemned to awareness. And if that sounds abstract, it gets worse. Heidegger doesn't let you hide in abstraction. He doesn't care about God or morals or metaphysical comfort food. He wants to know why you get out of bed in the morning. He wants to know how you live when every breath is already one step closer to death. His philosophy is about the fact that you will die someday and how that reality should shape the way you live right now. This is not easy philosophy. Heidegger takes away the ground beneath your feet. He makes you dizzy. His sentences stretch like barbed wire. He invents words when regular German just isn't enough because, some of those German words get pretty big already. He drags you into a forest of concepts where every path circles back on itself, and the only thing waiting at the center is you, staring at your own mortality. Every one of us hides in distractions. We drown in routine. We scroll, we shop, we gossip, we cling to other people's opinions, all to avoid hearing that silence inside ourselves. Heidegger pulls the plug. He says, stop running, face it. This is being, this is you, this is your death waiting. So today we step into his world, a world where existence isn't a given, it's the question that never stops chewing at you.
835.
Imagine standing in a library, floor-to-ceiling shelves, 1,000 years of books, 1,000,000 words about truth, justice, beauty, and virtue. Plato mumbling about perfect forms, Descartes obsessing over certainty, Kant building his neat little moral universe, and Heidegger walks in like a man at a crime scene. He scans the room, shakes his head, and says, "You've all forgotten the body." The body here is existence itself, being. Not this table exists or that tree is real, but the bigger, more primal question. What does it mean to exist at all? For Heidegger, philosophy had been so busy cataloguing the furniture of reality, it forgot to ask what the floor was made of. 2,000 years of thinkers talking about the meaning of life without ever stopping to notice that life itself, the raw fact of it, was slipping through their fingers. He calls this the question of being, and for him this is the only question. Everything else, politics, morality, aesthetics, those are second-order problems. They're distractions, cover stories. If you don't first ask what it means to be, you're just decorating a house that might not even have a foundation. But Heidegger wasn't gentle about it. He didn't pose this question in some nice little academic forum. He hurled it into the room like a grenade. Because once you really ask, once you let the words settle into your bloodstream, what does it mean to be? You can't escape. You can't hide behind your phone or your career or even your philosophy degree. The question sinks in and suddenly the floor tilts, the air feels heavier. You realize you've been living without ever really understanding what living means. Heidegger says Western philosophy made a fatal mistake with Plato. Plato's forms turned being into something stable, eternal, neat. Aristotle doubled down with categories, logic, and definitions. Fast forward to Descartes splitting mind from body, and Kant drawing clean blueprints of reason and morality. It's all architecture, built high and clever, but floating in midair. The real ground, the messy, anxious fact of existence, was ignored. Heidegger's solution? Start not with concepts, but with ourselves, with human beings, with the creature that actually asks this question in the first place. He gives the creature a new name, Dasein, literally being there. Not human in the biological sense, not soul or subject or ego, but existence as it's lived. Dasein is what you are before you get buried in labels. Dasein is you, awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, aware that you are here, that you are finite, that you are dangling in the middle of being without explanation. Heidegger's point is brutal. You can't answer the question of being by looking at objects. Tables don't care about existence. Trees don't sit around asking why they grow, at least as far as I'm aware. Only Dasein suffers the weight of being. So if we want to understand existence, we have to study the creature for whom existence is a problem. We have to study ourselves. And this is where Heidegger begins to feel a little bit dangerous, because he won't let you dodge. He doesn't talk about humanity in the abstract. He talks about you. He says, look, you are thrown into this world without warning. You didn't get a vote. You didn't choose your parents or your language or the century that you were born in. You just woke up here, blinking, terrified, stuck in a body that's already aging, heading toward a grave that you can't avoid. You are Dasein. That's the situation. No excuses, no philosophy degree required, just the raw fact of being there. And this being there isn't neutral. It's not some cosmic postcard. It's unstable, fragile, fleeting. Heidegger says most of us live in a state of distraction, a state he calls everydayness. We bury ourselves in work, in gossip, in the opinions of others. We hide in routines and habits because facing being head-on is too much. And because of that, the question of being gets buried, forgotten. Heidegger isn't surprised by this. He says forgetting being is our default. It's how civilization survives, by turning existence into background noise so we can function. If you spent every morning screaming into your coffee about the absurdity of being alive, and trust me, I've done it more than once, you'd never get to work. But forgetting comes with a price. In running from the question, we run from ourselves. We live borrowed lives, copy-pasting behaviors and opinions floating in the they, Heidegger's word for the anonymous crowd of conformity. So what happens when you wake up? When the question hits you square in the chest? Heidegger says this is the beginning of philosophy, the moment when Dasein pulls back the curtain. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like enlightenment. It feels like vertigo, like standing on the edge of a cliff with no railing. Suddenly, the things you thought were solid, career, family, politics, religion, look flimsy, temporary. Suddenly, the question of being is burning a hole in your gut, and you realize you don't know how to answer it. This is why Heidegger's writing feels like a haunted forest. He isn't leading you towards neat little packaged answers. He's dragging you deeper into the mystery, into the dark, where you can't tell if you're lost or just finally seeing clearly. His sentences knot themselves, circle back, refuse to give you clean conclusions. This isn't an accident. It's the experience of being itself, slippery, impossible to pin down, always vanishing as soon as you think you've got it. And here is the kicker. Heidegger doesn't want you to solve the question. He doesn't believe that you can. The point isn't to arrive at an answer, but to live inside the question, to carry it, to let it reshape how you move through the world, to be awake instead of sleepwalking through borrowed meanings. You didn't ask to be here. That's the first cut Heidegger makes. You didn't get a form to fill out, no checkbox for your parents, no drop-down menu for your century, no chance to reject the body that you woke up in. One moment there was nothing, the next you were blinking in a hospital room, lungs screaming, thrown into existence like a dice toss. Heidegger calls this Geworfenheit, and I apologize for my German pronunciation. I have never studied German. And it means thrownness. It's the brute fact that you are here without explanation, without contract, thrown into a culture, a language, a history already unfolding. You inherit the weight of the world like a coat that doesn't quite fit, and still you have to wear it. And what do we do with this terrifying fact? We bury it. We run from it. We hide in what Heidegger calls everydayness. Think of it like a prison made out of routines. The alarm clock, the commute, the emails, the gossip about a coworker, the scrolling through feeds until your eyes ache. All of it numbing, soothing, a way of smothering the raw strangeness of existing. Everydayness feels safe, familiar. That's why it works so well. Heidegger says we slip into the they. Not they as in other people, but the they, as in the anonymous voice that tells you how life should look. The they says, get a job, find a partner, buy a house, post smiling photos of vacations you barely enjoyed. The they is conformity disguised as wisdom. The they is everyone and no one. And once you sink into it, it's almost impossible to tell whether you're making choices or just recycling scripts. Listen to the way you talk. People say, they say, it's just how things are. That's the they talking through you. Heidegger calls this Dasein, the faceless mass. When you live as the they, you don't decide, you copy. You don't feel, you mimic. You dissolve into an anonymous hum like static on an old television. Thrownness means you had no control over arriving. Everydayness means you hand over what little control you do have. And the worst part is you don't even notice. The prison of everydayness isn't bars and chains. It's comfort, predictability. You think you're free, but every choice is borrowed. Heidegger is merciless about this. He says everydayness infects even our talk. Most of what we call conversation is just chatter, idle words that fill the silence without saying anything. You've heard it, the small talk about weather, the recycled opinions about politics, the movie everyone repeats the same adjectives about. Heidegger isn't against talking, he's against this kind of talking, the kind that keeps you from actually facing anything real. Chatter protects you from the silence where the question of being waits. And when chatter isn't enough, there's curiosity, what Heidegger calls a restless hunger for distraction. Not curiosity in the noble sense, the quest for knowledge, but curiosity as in scrolling endlessly, clicking headlines, searching for novelty just to avoid sitting with yourself. A nervous itch for stimulation, never letting things sink in. Pile on top of that ambiguity, the way everyone speaks with half-formed cliches, leaving everything undecided, and you have the full recipe for what Heidegger calls fallenness. Dasein falls away from its own authenticity, falls into the anonymous comfort of the they, falls into distraction, chatter, and superficiality. Sound familiar? Well, it should. It's your Monday morning, your Friday night, your guilty binge watching, your conversations where you're already planning what to say before the other person finishes. Everydayness is life on autopilot. And Heidegger doesn't say this is a bad habit. He says this is the default condition of human existence. Everydayness is not the exception, it's the rule. Almost everyone you know is living inauthentically, hiding from their own thrownness, dissolving into the fog of the they. But the knife twists deeper, of course it does. Heidegger insists that even though you are thrown into this world without consent, the responsibility for what you do in it is still yours. You don't get to say, I didn't choose this. True, you didn't, but you are here. You are thrown, and pretending otherwise just means that you're running from the truth. Thrownness doesn't just mean your birth, it means the whole texture of your life. You didn't choose the century, the culture, the genetic lottery, the economic conditions, the way technology shaped your attention span. But all of that frames the possibilities you now have to own. Being there means you can't escape the fact that you exist within a context. You are not a blank slate. You are already entangled in the world. So what does that leave you with? A paradox. On one hand, you didn't choose to be here. On the other hand, you are responsible for how you live here. And most of us collapse under the pressure, defaulting to the they, defaulting to everydayness. Because it's easier to mimic than to confront, easier to distract than to wake up. But Heidegger says the cracks show. Everydayness can only bury the question of being for so long. Thrownness leaks out in moments of disorientation. You wake up in the night and the silence feels unbearable. You catch your reflection and it looks like a stranger. You sit at your desk and the work suddenly seems absurd. I certainly get days like that. These aren't accidents. They are reminders. The prison walls are made of paper and sometimes the light gets through. And the ugly gift is that everydayness is never complete. You can fall into the they, you can chatter, distract, dissolve, but there's always something inside you that remembers, something unsettled, something waiting for the silence. That part of you is what Heidegger calls authenticity. Not some heroic lifestyle, not self-help slogans, pastel Instagram quotes, but the possibility of living as yourself, awake to your own being, instead of an echo of the they. Thrownness plus everydayness equals the basic situation of human life. You are hurled into existence without asking, and then you spend most of your time running from that fact. But Heidegger doesn't leave you there. The cracks in the prison matter. The moments of unease, of disorientation, of silence, they are signals. The question of being doesn't die, no matter how much you try to bury it. This is why Heidegger feels more like a horror movie director described as a philosopher. He sets the stage, you're trapped, you're thrown, the walls are closing in. And just when you think you've got a way to cope, he rips it away, showing how thin the comfort is. Thrownness is the setup, everydayness is the trap. And the next section, the one we are heading into now, is the rupture, anxiety. The moment when the prison dissolves, when the chatter dies, and you come face to face with nothing. Fear is simple. Fear is when there's a shadow at the edge of the alley, when the boss sends you a vague email that says, "We need to talk," when the test results are late. Fear has an object. You can point at it, measure it, fight it or flee from it. Fear is manageable because it belongs to something in the world. But anxiety, Heidegger says anxiety has no object. Anxiety is about nothing. Not nothing in the sense of not much, but nothing in the sense of the void, the absence of ground, the sense that the world itself had slipped off its axis. When anxiety hits, it's not just that you don't know what's wrong, it's that the entire structure of knowing collapses. Picture it. You're walking down the street, sun shining, nothing wrong. And then it happens. A shiver under your skin, a sour weight in your stomach. You look around and everything feels alien. The buildings look staged. The people walking by seem like cardboard cutouts. Even your own body feels borrowed. That's not fear, that's anxiety. Heidegger calls it angst. Angst is the solvent that melts the prison of everydayness. You've been hiding in chatter, in scrolling, in office gossip. You've been playing around with the they, and then suddenly, in the middle of some perfectly ordinary moment, the bottom drops out. The routines collapse. The they dissolves into static. You're left staring into the nothingness that underlies everything. And here's Heidegger's point. That's not a malfunction. That's reality breaking through. Angst is not a sickness to be cured. It's a reminder. It's the call of authenticity knocking on your skull. Because what angst reveals is this. The world has no inherent meaning. All those scripts that they handed you, career path, social roles, the endless list of what's normal, all of it is scaffolding. In anxiety, the scaffolding falls away. You're left with yourself, not the self as defined by society, not the self as defined by your Instagram bio, the self as sheer existence. Dasein, naked, trembling, finite. Most of us run from this. We feel the anxiety creep in and we scramble for distraction. We turn on a screen, call a friend, pour a drink, dive back into the hum of the they. Anything to shut it out. But Heidegger says that when you do this, you betray yourself. You fall back into inauthenticity. You shove the truth back underground. What truth? Well, that you are temporary. That your life is a finite stretch between nothing and nothing. That there is no guarantee, no eternal meaning, no script you can trust. In angst, all the masks fall off and you see the raw fact. You are a being who will die. But here's the turn. For Heidegger, that revelation is not despair, it's possibility. In that vertigo, that trembling, lies the chance to live authentically. Because only when you see through the illusions of everydayness can you begin to choose for yourself. Only when you face nothing can you act from freedom. Anxiety, then, is not the enemy. It's the wake-up call. Heidegger calls it the call of conscience. Not conscience like morality, not a voice telling you not to steal or cheat, but conscience as in the silent tug that says, you are running away, you are hiding. You are not owning your existence, and the call says, stop. Heidegger insists this call doesn't come from outside. It's not God whispering, not society scolding. It comes from you, your own deepest possibility. It's Dasein calling itself back from the they, back from chatter and distraction, back into its own most truth. And the tone of that call, anxiety. The hollow ache in your stomach, the cold sweat at 3 a.m, the sense that the world just slipped sideways. That's not madness. That's your own being calling you home. Now don't confuse this with comfort. Authenticity isn't cozy, doesn't feel good, it feels terrifying. To live authentically is to live with the constant awareness of your finitude, the knowledge that every moment matters because you don't get infinite do-overs. Authenticity doesn't erase the anxiety, it embraces it. It says, this dizziness, this vertigo, this nothingness, this is the truth, and I will live in it. Think of it like this. Everydayness is anesthesia. Anxiety is the pain that tells you you're alive. You can numb yourself, stay safe, dissolve into the they, or you can feel the sting, the burn, the rawness of existence, and choose to live with your eyes open. And Heidegger's point is savage. Most people will never do it. Most people will retreat. Most people will choose the narcotic of the they. Authenticity is rare. Authenticity is for those who dare to walk into the anxiety and not turn back. But when you do, when you let the anxiety speak instead of silencing it, you gain something priceless. You gain ownership. Suddenly, your choices are not hand-me-downs from the they. They're yours, your career, your relationships, your projects. They stop being cliches and start being lived decisions. You see the groundlessness of it all and you choose anyway. That's authenticity. That's freedom. Of course, freedom sounds noble until you realize it's terrifying. No ground, no guarantees, no cosmic safety net. Just you, dangling over the abyss, every decision carving the shape of your finite life. That's the price of authenticity. You don't get certainty, you get the abyss and the courage to act anyway. This is why Heidegger sounds more like a horror director than a philosopher. Angst is not a concept, it's an experience. You know it because you felt it. That sudden sense of unreality, that shiver when the world seems strange, that restless dread you can't name. Heidegger says, stop fleeing from it, lean into it. Because that dread is the door, and behind the door is you, your real life, your authentic existence. So here the plot thickens. We talked about the forgotten question, we explored the prison of everydayness, and now we rip a hole in the prison wall. Anxiety breaks through, dismantling the illusions, and offers you a choice. Keep running, or stop and listen. And if you stop and listen, you hear it. The whisper of conscience, the call of your own being, reminding you that time is short, that life is finite, that every breath is already one step closer to death. Every breath you take is a countdown. That's not metaphor, that's physiology. The clock ticks in your chest, your cells, your blood. Each inhale, another step closer to the last exhale. But Heidegger says most of us live as if that's not true. We talk about death like it's theoretical, like it belongs to other people, the obituary section, the funeral you have to dress up for, always someone else's problem. Heidegger calls this the inauthentic view of death. We treat it as a distant event, something that happens someday. But this someday never really arrives because in our minds it's always pushed onto someone else's horizon, the neighbor, the stranger in the news, the celebrity. Even when it touches your family, your friends, you grieve, but you don't let it penetrate all the way in. You still hold on to the fantasy that death is external, that you somehow are exempt. But the truth is uglier. Death isn't an event in the future. It's the structure of your being. From the moment you are thrown into this world, you are already being toward death. Your existence is defined by finitude. The horizon of death is not an end point out there somewhere. It's the invisible wall enclosing every moment of your life. Imagine a game without an end condition. No victory, no failure, no time limit. It wouldn't matter what you did. You could wander forever. The moves would have no weight. That's life without death. Meaningless. Death gives life its gravity. Death is the limit that sharpens every choice, the finitude that makes each moment real. This is what Heidegger means when he says being toward death is the most authentic mode of existence. To live authentically is to carry your death with you. Not in a morbid Gothic sense, but in the sense of being awake to the fact that you don't live forever. You're on borrowed time, and the clock is ticking. The problem, of course, is that no one can die for you. Death is the most individual experience. Friends can comfort you, doctors can fight for you, priests can whisper prayers over you, but when the moment comes, it's yours alone. You can't outsource it, you can't delegate it. Heidegger says this makes death the most personal possibility, the one thing no one else can share. So death individualizes. It strips away the they. In the face of death, chatter evaporates, distractions collapse. The they self cannot shield you. In that silence, it's just you and your mortality. And that's the moment where authenticity becomes possible. When you stop pretending you're infinite. When you stop pretending you have time to waste. When you face the nothing that waits for you and say, I will live here, now, on my terms. Think about how you live when you forget this. You binge time. You throw hours into work you hate. Scrolling you don't remember. Conversations that leave you emptier than when you started. You live as if tomorrow is guaranteed, as if death is some rumor that won't touch you. That's the inauthentic way. Running from death, pretending it belongs to someone else. But anxiety rips that illusion open. Anxiety reveals death not as an event out there, but as the silent shadow already here. Every day you're already dying. Not in some abstract sense, but in the fact that time is slipping through you, irretrievable, irreversible. To live authentically is not to brood over this, but to own it. To let death frame your existence so that your choices stop being borrowed and start being yours. And it's not about some heroic bucket list, skydiving, chasing sunsets, proving you're alive with some fucking TikTok trophy. That is just another mask of the they. Authentic being toward death is quieter, rawer. It's knowing your time is finite and letting that truth cut away the inessential. It's asking, if I died tomorrow, would this choice still matter? Would this conversation, this project, this relationship be mine, or is it just more chatter, more distraction, more anesthesia? For Heidegger, the most radical freedom comes from this confrontation. Death frees you from the illusions of permanence. Death forces you to recognize your uniqueness because no one else can live or die your life. In facing death, you face yourself, and in that confrontation, you gain the possibility of authenticity. But don't mistake this for peace. Authenticity is not serenity. It is not acceptance in the soft, comforting sense. It is standing on the edge of the abyss and not turning away. It is carrying the weight of your finitude every day, knowing that you're running out of time, and refusing to numb yourself with the they. It's choosing to live in full awareness of your mortality, even though it terrifies you. This is where Heidegger diverges from thinkers like Schopenhauer, who saw life as suffering, or Kierkegaard, who turned dread into faith. Heidegger doesn't give you consolation. He doesn't tell you that suffering has meaning or that God will catch you. He tells you your death is yours and it's coming. You can flee into distraction or you can face it and live authentically. That's it. Those are the options. And maybe this is why his philosophy is still so sharp, because he doesn't sugarcoat anything. He doesn't wrap it in theology or optimism. He holds your face to the mirror and he makes you see the skull grinning underneath. He says, you are being toward death. Own it. Anxiety was the tremor. Death is the earthquake. Everydayness shatters in the face of your own finitude. And for a brief, terrifying, yet liberating moment, you see clearly. You see that time is short, that meaning is not given but made, that no one else can live for you, that no one else can die for you. And in that moment, you have a choice to retreat back into the they or to step forward into authenticity, trembling but awake. And just when you think you've grasped it, the twist comes. Because this man who gave us the rawest, most unflinching confrontation with death, with authenticity, with being itself, this same man fell into the hysteria of fascism. Heidegger, the prophet of authenticity, put on the mask of the they in its most grotesque form. And that is where we are going next. You can't talk Heidegger without talking about the uniform, that Hugo Boss uniform, the swastika on his lapel, the speeches he gave as rector of Freiburg University in 1933, praising Hitler, saluting the inner truth and greatness of the Nazi movement. It's not a footnote, it's a stain so dark it bleeds into every page of his work. Because here is the paradox. The man who told us to live authentically, to resist the they, to reject borrowed meanings, he joined a political machine built on conformity, hysteria, and obedience. The philosopher of authenticity became a mouthpiece for one of the most inauthentic, dehumanizing ideologies in history. So the question gnaws us. Was Heidegger's philosophy tainted from the start? Did his obsession with being, with the call of destiny, with the power of authenticity, pave the way for fascism? Or was he just a coward, a man who betrayed his own insights when the pressure came down? His defenders scramble. Some say it was opportunism, a way to protect his career. Others argue it was a temporary lapse, that he distanced himself later, that his philosophy transcends his politics. And then there are the black notebooks, private journals published decades later, where Heidegger made anti-Semitic remarks that cannot be written off as political convenience. Words that suggest the stain ran deeper than anyone wanted to admit. So we're left with this contradiction. The man who exposed the shallowness of everyday chatter gave speeches filled with propaganda cliches. The man who warned against falling into the they threw his lot in with the crowd at its most hysterical. The man who told us to face anxiety and authenticity fled into the cheap certainty of ideology. And it cuts deeper, because Heidegger's philosophy itself contains language that, in hindsight, feels disturbingly compatible with fascist rhetoric. His talk of destiny, of a people's historical calling, of authentic belonging to a community, phrases that can be read as fertile ground for nationalist madness. The Nazis twisted everything they touched, and Heidegger, willingly or not, gave them words they could use. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Heidegger didn't just get used. He volunteered. He believed, at least for a time, that National Socialism was the movement that could renew Germany, that could jolt a decaying civilization out of its everyday complacency. In his speeches, he echoed themes of destiny, of sacrifice, of authentic renewal. He wrapped the Nazi project in existential grandeur. And so we're left with a philosopher who stares into the abyss of being, but when history knocked, he chose the easy mask. He who preached authenticity chose inauthenticity. He who told us to resist the they was swallowed by it. What do we do with that? Do we burn the books? Do we reject being and time because of the weight in its margins? Or do we separate the ideas from the man, insisting that truth can still shine through even if the messenger was corrupt? This isn't just about Heidegger, it's about philosophy itself. Can ideas be divorced from the lives of those who create them? Can brilliance survive corruption? Or does the shadow of the man forever haunt the words he wrote? Take Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, even Schopenhauer, flawed, neurotic, often miserable men. But Heidegger's flaw isn't eccentricity or arrogance, it's complicity with evil. That makes the stakes higher, that makes the question harder. And maybe this is the final lesson Heidegger teaches us, even if he didn't mean to. Philosophy doesn't save you from yourself. You can write 1,000 pages on authenticity and still live a lie. You can dissect being and still sell your soul to power. You can see clearly into the abyss and still step off the wrong edge. It's easy to treat philosophers like prophets, as if deep insight into the nature of existence guarantees deep moral character. Heidegger proves that's false. You can stare into the question of being and still turn away when the world burns. You can be brilliant and cowardly. You can be profound and complicit. And this forces us back into ourselves, because maybe the danger isn't just Heidegger, it's us. Every one of us is capable of parroting words about authenticity while living inauthentically. Every one of us is capable of fleeing into ideology, into comfort, into the they, when the anxiety gets too sharp. Heidegger is both warning and mirror. Philosophy alone won't save you. If you don't live it, if you don't carry authenticity into the real world, then it's just chatter, just more distraction. So we are left in the shadow. Heidegger's thought is brilliant, haunting, indispensable, and compromised. His life is a study in betrayal, not just of others, but of his own deepest insights. And the question is whether we can still use his philosophy as a tool for authenticity, or whether the stain makes it unusable. But maybe that's the point. Maybe philosophy isn't about purity. Maybe it's about struggle, about wrestling with ideas that are tainted, human, about taking what can wake us up even if the messenger was asleep at the wheel. About recognizing that even the clearest vision of being doesn't absolve us of responsibility. And maybe the most authentic way to read Heidegger is not to excuse him, not to condemn him outright, but to face the contradiction head on. To say, here is a man who told us to resist the they, and then he joined it. Here is a man who spoke of authenticity, and yet lived inauthentically when it mattered most. The contradiction doesn't erase the philosophy. It reminds us that authenticity isn't an idea to admire. It's a practice to live, moment by moment, especially when history presses hardest. You've been thrown here. No preface. One moment nothing, the next you're gasping for breath under hospital lights, already sentenced to die. That's the opening scene of your existence. And every day since, you've been building disguises to cover the fact. Distractions, routines, chatter, scrolling, ambition, noise. Heidegger rips those disguises away. He says, you are Dasein, not a cog, not a statistic, not a puppet dangling on someone else's strings. You are the being who asks about being. You are the creature that cannot escape its own awareness. And that awareness is a burden. It's anxiety clawing at your ribs. It's the silence you can't stand. It's the fact that one day, maybe sooner than you think, you will stop breathing and the world will keep going without you. Most of us run from this. We dissolve into the they, into conformity, into chatter, into borrowed lives. We laugh at the wrong jokes, chase the wrong jobs, marry the wrong people, scroll until our eyes burn. All so we don't have to hear the call of conscience, the reminder that we're running out of time. But anxiety is the crack in the wall, the moment when the world slips and you realize you don't have forever. That's not a glitch in the system, that's the system breaking through. That's authenticity calling your name. And death is the horizon. Not an event someday, not a rumor that happens to other people. Death is the frame around every moment of your life. Death is what gives your choices weight. Death is the reason every wasted hour stings. To live authentically, Heidegger says, is to live as being toward death. To carry your mortality like a shadow and let it sharpen you, wake you, remind you that every moment is yours alone. But here is the sting. Even Heidegger failed. The man who told us to resist the they joined it. The man who taught authenticity sold himself to ideology. The philosopher of being betrayed his own insight, and that betrayal is part of the lesson. Philosophy doesn't save you. Words don't save you. Living saves you. And living authentically isn't about what you write or say. It's about the choices you make when the pressure comes. So what now? You are thrown. You are finite. You are already being toward death. The question is whether you'll keep hiding in the anesthesia of everydayness, or whether you'll face the anxiety and let it wake you up. Heidegger leaves you with no comforting promises, no heaven, no happy ending, no cosmic safety net, just the abyss and the chance to stare into it without blinking. Because authenticity is not about comfort, it's not about finding peace. It's about standing on the edge of your own mortality and choosing anyway. Choosing to own your life, your time, your being. Choosing to live, not as an echo of the they, but as yourself, trembling, finite, and awake. So tonight, when the silence creeps in, when the anxiety whispers, don't run. Sit with it. Let it scrape your bones. That's the call. That's the truth. That's you. And that's Heidegger's gift, his curse. You are already dying. The only question is whether you'll live before you do. Thank you, you beautiful lot, for joining me in the paradoxical world of Martin Heidegger. As always, I would love to hear your feedback. You can leave your thoughts on our website on Substack, which is at theobservingeye.com. And we're also on those fucking socials, which is Instagram, X, and TikTok, all with the same handle, at theobservingeye. So you can find us on there and, type things at us. We're also on YouTube, which you may have found us on, which is youtube.com/@theobservingeye. And this is where all the videos live if you are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever audio platform you funnel us into your ears through, I guess. Now, I've also got an email address, which you can wax philosophical with me if you want, or you can recommend ideas for future episodes, or you can rain down hell on me if you disagree with something I'm saying. You can email me on that address, which is David, so professional, david@theobservingeye.com, and I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. That's it from me. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.